This week on YCN Vermont Wrap, we'll take a look at several of the top news stories from the past week and a half, and we'll dissect a few of the issues that have arisen this past week, including a felonious sexual predator who was permitted to walk free after his arrest following what police officials describe as a, quote, lengthy investigation. Also, Vermont's Department of Health Commissioner Dr. Mark Levin has, whether intentionally or by accident, stumbled upon what may actually be the solution to both the war on drugs and the opioid epidemic that's sweeping not only the state, but also a significant portion of the country. And if you think the August primary wasn't a referendum on guns, well, then the carpet-bagging executive director of Gun Sense Vermont wants to set you straight. We'll also reach into the mailbag and read some of your letters from the past week. YCN Vermont Wrap is on now. Come on, let's go have some fun. Welcome back to YCN Vermont Wrap. I'm Keith Hanson. On Wednesday, Vermont State Police troopers announced the arrest of 68-year-old John Paul Chenier of Chester, Vermont. That came as a result of what officials called a, quote, lengthy investigation. Chenier was charged with kidnapping and aggravated sexual assault, both felonies, resulting from an incident that's alleged to have occurred on May 12th at the Interstate 91 southbound way station and rest stop. Now, I'm sure that you'll agree with me that both kidnapping and aggravated sexual assaults are pretty egregious crimes. But what makes this case even more disgusting and reprehensible is the fact that this degenerate scumbag got to sleep in his own bed later that evening because he was released, and get this, on a notice to appear, conditions of release, and unsecured personal recognizance bail. So put another way, this guy walked out of the state police barracks on his signature. That's it. Now, there used to be a time when the criminal justice system existed for a reason. Going way, 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 way back, the idea of jails and prisons were to serve as reformatories. Today, they've become at best warehouses, and at worst, universities of criminal enterprise. Well, think about it from this perspective. You get caught and you're sentenced to a period of time in prison because you haven't gotten your criminal processes down correctly. You were, in essence, a bad criminal. You were bad at your job. So you get sent to a place where you can meet with and study under other criminals. Then once you're released, you're back at it again, and the cycle continues. Well, today, the concept of simply warehousing criminals is viewed as taboo by progressives who feel that this practice is, well, cruel, that it's mean, that it's not fair, and that it's too punitive. And if you listen to my radio program, you know that I have very little patience or tolerance for criminals. In fact, I utterly despise them. The only criminals I like are dead ones. Because in the cold stiffness of death, one guarantee emerges, that they'll never offend ever again. Now, what I'm about to explain to you may seem quite revolutionary and groundbreaking, but I assure you that it's predicated on a very basic concept of decent and civilized society. Prisons and jails exist not for the pleasure and comfort of those who are incarcerated or imprisoned within their walls. Prisons and jails do exist as a warehouse. They are a storage facility for those individuals in our society who just haven't quite gotten the message that their criminal, predatory, antisocial behavior is not going to be tolerated in society, and that criminally victimizing law-abiding citizens for their benefit or gain will be rebuked in the strongest and most unpleasant of terms. And yes, these facilities exist to protect law-abiding citizens and a civilized society from those individuals who cannot abide by the simple terms and conditions of living their lives freely and responsibly. Now, I've said this many, many times before, and it bears repeating over and over again. I do not now, nor will I ever, fault the men and women of law enforcement for this breakdown. These people put their lives on the line 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, willingly interacting with unimaginable scum and with great personal risk to keep their prospective communities safe. The fault lies with the politicians of this state as well as the judicial system. Both the politicians and the judiciary have literally caved in and traded the safety and security of the citizens of this state for the feelings of those who prey upon those citizens. Their feelings and their self-esteem is put on a rung of priority much higher than the safety for you and that of your family. Now, this is one topic I will never be silent about, ever, and neither should you. Your elected officials are permitting these maggots to walk free, while they slowly chip away at your rights to possess instruments that are designed to help you defend yourself and your families. And they're aided by leftist Marxist organizations like Gun Sense Vermont, who we need to have yet another conversation about because their carpetbagging executive director feels the need to constantly maintain what she feels is her relevance in the conversation. So we'll give her lots of attention a little later on in the program. We are going to take a quick break right now, but when we return, Vermont's Department of Health Commissioner, Dr. Mark Levin, may have just solved not only the war on drugs, but also the opioid epidemic as well. Well, what, you think I'm being sarcastic? Well, yeah, of course I am. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to YCN Vermont Wrap. I'm Keith Hanson. The Vermont Department of Health issued a warning to drug users this week after several overdose deaths that health officials and law enforcement officers attribute to the inhalation of illegal street drugs. Now, according to a press release appearing recently on the healthvermont.gov website, at least 2 of the fatal overdoses involved people snorting various types of drugs. The release went on to say that officials did not yet know what types of drugs were snorted or involved in these cases. However, the health department did confirm that, quote, cocaine with fentanyl has been a cause of death in the state, end quote. Health officials went on to say that both autopsies and toxicology screens were being conducted in an effort to pinpoint exactly what drug had been consumed in each of those fatal cases. Now, there are a variety of ways that people, from the casual drug user to even the most hardcore of addicts, can introduce mind-altering and potentially lethal items into their bodies. Let's take a quick look at some of the more popular means of drug consumption. There's smoking, which is a popular means of ingesting substances like marijuana, crack cocaine, methamphetamine, and even opium gum. There's the ever-popular injection route, which can be used to shoot cocaine, heroin, and other types of opioids directly into the bloodstream. And then there's snorting, which is a popular method amongst users who feel that using a needle and shooting drugs into your veins is somehow dirty and beneath them. Inhaling or snorting is a method that can be used to ingest mind-numbing intoxicants such as crushed opioid tablets, powdered cocaine, heroin, and even fentanyl. Now, truth be told, I've never done an illegal drug, ever. So I certainly can't attest to the mind-altering effects of any of these substances. But I can assure you that the proverbial jury is still out on whether or not any sort of earth-shattering high is produced by inhaling or snorting the ever-popular, lightly lubricated Trojan's ribbed for her pleasure. And at the time of this filming, regrettably, there were no Middlebury College art students available that I could survey. So, alas, I have no reliable or verifiable data. But I digress. The Commissioner of the Department of Health, Dr. Mark Levin, expressed concern that fentanyl is being mixed with other inhalable street drugs, like cocaine and methamphetamine, which, in his words, quote, broadens an already difficult problem. So, in an effort to keep junkies who have no respect or value for their own lives alive, Dr. Levin issued some important safety tips. Now let's review some of those tips, and feel free to take notes, because there may just be a quiz at the end of the program. Important safety tip number 1. Do not use your drugs alone. Illicit drug use is far more enjoyable in the presence of other friends and junkies who are hoping to get high off of your stash for free. These friends, if not already blasted into semi-consciousness, can monitor you for signs that you could be in drug-related distress and spring into action. Important safety tip number 2. Use only one drug at a time. Not only will this prolong your supply of illegal street drugs, but you might just prevent an adverse interaction between 2 or more substances. And moreover, the health department recommends that you not mix your alcohol and benzodiazepines, or benzos as they're casually referred to by your average seasoned street drug professional, because this is bad. Very bad. Like perpetual sleep bad. Important safety tip number 3. Cut the amount of illegal street drugs that you use each and every time that you use. Again, This will prolong your stash. Granted, you probably won't be on autopilot to the moon or adequately tie-dye your frontal lobes in Technicolor, but hey, everything in moderation, as the saying goes. Important safety tip number 4. Test the strength of the drug prior to using the whole amount. Try just a little bit first, perhaps on a cracker with a semi-soft cheese, a smear of chicken liver mousse, or with a delightful glass of chilled Chardonnay. And if you're still conscious after 10 minutes, tie off and go nuts. Important safety tip number 5. Inject less if it feels strong. Now this one confuses me because I thought the air fingers, quote, rush that these junkies were after was the whole point of getting high. And in all seriousness, the media no longer discusses the brand of smack that is determined to have caused widespread overdose deaths, because the junkies will actually go out of their way to find that particular brand, specifically seeking that literal killer high. Now, all sarcasm and jest aside, each and every one of these safety tips issued by the Vermont Department of Health is predicated on the concept that the person who is using drugs actually possesses an iota of responsibility. Now, I have to ask you, have you ever in your life met a responsible junkie? These are the people that shoot up in front of kids. You know, when you hear about police officers finding vehicles with people slumped out unconscious behind the wheel with little kids running around unsupervised in the back seat? Yeah, these are the responsible junkies. These are the people that discard their bloody, uncapped needles in parking lots and playgrounds. These are the same responsible citizens that burglarize and steal to feed their drug habits. So I really have to ask, pragmatically speaking, in what world does Dr. Mark Levin actually live that junkies are going to practice the equivalent of safe sex when shooting up, smoking, or snorting drugs? Oh, and lest I forget, the final safety tip. Yep, you guessed it. Call 911. Let the professionals pull you back from the brink of death with Narcan. Now, I have to be honest with you. This pisses me off more than anything. Ever since the carrying of Narcan has become standard operating procedure for the majority of police departments, fire rescue agencies, and paramedics, junkies have treated an overdose as something that is manageable and no longer terminal. They're not afraid of overdosing anymore because they truly believe that the cavalry will simply roll in and juice them back to life. And speak to your average beat cop, your average firefighter, or your average paramedic, and ask them about their frequent flyers. These are the druggies that have been Narcaned 2, 5, 10, and sometimes even 20 times before. Some get Narcaned multiple times in the same day. This has become the rule. It's no longer the exception. We're going to take a quick break, but when YCN Vermont Wrap continues, Gun Sense Vermont Executive Director Clay Lasher Summers has rubbed 2 or 3 of her brain cells together and deduced that Governor Phil Scott's primary win was the result of a statewide referendum on gun control. We'll tackle this stupidity right after this. In an op-ed appearing in the Caledonian Record the week before last, Gun Sense Vermont Executive Director Clay Lasher Summers laid out the claim that Governor Phil Scott's recent primary win, quote, shows that the vast majority of Vermonters, including those in the Republican Party, are supportive of his courageous actions to pass gun safety measures, end quote. Summers doubled down on this theory by asserting that Vermonters, quote, back common sense gun measures, then went on to state that, quote, poll after poll show widespread support for gun violence prevention, and then to cite a statistic that 67% of Vermonters support the gun safety measures signed into law by the governor earlier this year. Now, the poll she cited originated from Vermont Public Radio and Vermont's PBS affiliates. Now, I don't need to recite any more of her baseless and tendentious assertions for you, because those of you with critical thinking skills understand this regurgitated claptrap as nothing more than the bloviations of a New Hampshire organic hippie farmer who's paid to propagate social Marxism in a state that, up until recently, has served as a benchmark for Second Amendment freedoms. Now, before you do anything, I'd like to recommend that you check out a book entitled How to Lie with Statistics, authored by Daryl Huff. It's a great book, an easy read that shows you exactly how you, or people like Clay Lasher Summers, can manipulate data and sample groups to produce virtually any desired statistic. It's quite easy. In fact, here's what I'm going to do. I want you to email me here at the YCN studios, khanson@ycnnow.com. That's khanson@ycnnow.com. And I'm going to send you, completely free, an electronic PDF copy of that book and a second book entitled The Three Languages of Politics. I'll keep my email address up on the bottom of the screen on the scroller so you can copy it down and make your request. Anyway, let me assure you of one thing. The sentiments that are expressed and embraced by Summers and her gaggle of man-hating, silver-haired, hyphenated last-name Subaru drivers and their soy-sipping feminine beta male counterparts are indeed in the minority. There are really three groups of people in this state, and I want you to be aware of this. First and foremost, and most importantly, there are people who respect the Second Amendment, period. They may be hunters, they may be avid shooters, they may even include people who don't necessarily own firearms, but recognize and respect your right to do so if you choose. Then there are those who could care less either way. They don't care. And then there are the Gun Sense Vermont sycophants, who utterly and viscerally hate people like me and you. They don't hate the gun. They hate the people who own the guns and the people who respect them for what they are from a constitutional standpoint. A tool to prevent tyrannical overreach from a government that has devolved from a constitutional republic into a traditional democracy or an oligarchy. Period. And once you understand this, you'll understand why Gun Sense Vermont had the sense to appoint someone like Clay Lasher Summers as their executive director. You see, Clay Lasher Summers possesses the absolute moral authority to speak out against gun violence because she herself is a victim of gun violence. Shot in the back as a young girl with a hunting rifle and left for dead by an abusive male family member. The same type of person who today would probably be permitted to walk free under the auspices of bail reform. But Clay Lasher Summers is a woman, and more importantly, she's a female victim of an attempted domestic violence homicide with a gun perpetrated by an evil man. You know, that whole toxic masculinity thing. That makes Clay Lasher Summers a dream come true for Marxist groups like Gun Sense Vermont. Because anyone who dares to challenge her absolute moral authority risks facing the full unbridled wrath of the group's members for assaulting the victim. So here's my advice to Gun Sense Vermont. Bring on your wrath, because none of you scare me. We've got to take a quick break, but when YCN Vermont Wrap continues, some final thoughts for the week, plus we'll dip into the mailbag and read a few of your letters. We'll be right back after this quick break. In the mailbag this week, Rick of Middlebury writes, quote, Keith, one of my coworkers at the college, I can only assume that's Middlebury College, told me about your program, loved the show, and I've started streaming your morning radio programs as well. Would you ever consider speaking at a location close to Middlebury? Well, Rick, there are two things I absolutely love: public speaking and confrontations. So the simple answer is absolutely, I'd be happy to. But I prefer to wait a little while longer until the show has had a chance to really fully get rooted in the state. Because truthfully, I'd hate to do a presentation and not have protesters screaming their anti-fascist catchphrases from behind the barricades. Thanks for the invite. We'll take a look at it maybe next spring. Margaret, with a hyphenated last name in Bethel, wrote, Keith, congratulations on getting your 15 minutes of fame. It's sad to think that there are so many more deserving people out there, and yet you're the one they reward with a television show. Must be desperate for viewers. Well, Margaret from Bethel with the hyphenated last name. By the way, are you a Subaru driver as well, too? The show started in May, and here it is, September. So it's been just slightly longer than 15 minutes. And this could come as a surprise to you, but I really don't care about fame. It's not what I'm after. It's not me. My goal with all of this is to protect and defend this country that I love so much. from godless progressive morons just like you, who claim to be tolerant, that profess to practice love and acceptance, but are at their core some of the most vile, intolerant, and hate-filled people that have ever trudged through a miserable existence on this planet. Now, it's not about me. It's really all about you, or more appropriately, exposing your agenda and pissing you off in the process. That's going to do it for this week's edition of YCN Vermont Wrap. Be sure to email me and request your electronic copies of the 2 books I mentioned earlier, How to Lie with Statistics and The 3 Languages of Politics. You're going to enjoy them, and you'll definitely learn a thing or two. And as always, be sure to share with me your thoughts about this week's program. Please make a note of the email. That's khanson@ycnnow.com. That's khanson@ycnnow.com. Be sure to let me know the city or town that you live in as well, too. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at @RealKeithHanson. That's at @RealKeithHanson on Twitter. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody. Talk to you next week.